You're right, just breathe.
Thank you for joining the Always Elevating show on the Women Empowerment Network. This is the career series that we've been doing. Again, I am your host, YayaE, and I am joined here today by my lovely friend, Elsa De Leon, on the beautiful island of Roatan, Honduras. And I am so excited to get into the conversation today. So we're going to just start with, who's my girl, Elsa?
Oh, hey. So, I am a Dominicana living in New York. I moved before New York. I was living in Massachusetts. So, I'm not a born and raised New Yorker. But, you know, like, I do love New York. I love the speed of it. I like that there's so much to do. We love, like, finding and discovering new things to do in New York. And we love to travel, as we can see sort of in the background. So, I'm definitely a traveler at heart. I love exploring new cultures, new food, new people. It's always, like, very exciting to me. So, I met Ayana through an app, actually, to make friends in the new city. So we connected.
Hey Vina.
Hey Vina.
They are friends. They met in college. Super cool app.
Yeah. So a few years ago now, like
2018.
Yeah. Wow. So it was pretty cool. So that's how we met. But while I was, meeting Ayana and getting used to the city of New York, I was working as a social worker. Actually, when we first met in 2018, I was doing family therapy in the home. So I was doing home-based therapy with different families, specifically with children and teenagers, and going from home to home throughout the borough of Manhattan, mainly, to do family therapy. But now I'm doing therapy in the school with elementary school children. So I've gone through a journey of social work, the little babies, in Brooklyn.
In terms of your career journey, how did it start, and how do you feel you got to where you are now in that career path?
So it started in college. I honestly didn't know that much about social work, though. I think it was based more off of like Law and Order and things like that, where you would see like social workers almost like taking children from home. So I didn't know a lot about it until I was, studying psychology, learning more about the careers within psychology.
How did you come to choosing psychology? Sidebar.
So I think so. My freshman year, I took a bunch of classes. When you have to take kind of those general courses throughout college, and I love psychology. I think one thing that like it also matches my personality in terms of like I love sort of like hearing people's stories and listening to others and just getting to know people, and then not immediately giving advice, because I think sometimes when you think of therapy, like you think people are like just automatically giving you advice, but a big part of therapy I think is just listening. And so like I've always loved getting to know new people. So even like an app like where you meet other women, like to me was pretty cool, because it's like you get to meet women in a different way. You think of dating apps, but you don't think of like how do you make friendships, and as you get older, making friendships, it becomes very different. So it's just like I felt like it matched my personality. I was really interested in just how the mind works too, and just how people work as humans, and I think and the listening part, and I think that all of those things combined is what makes psychology like really interesting to me, and specifically child psychology. Like I love working with children. It's just so interesting to see their growth, and to see like working with like a family dynamic has always been interesting to me. So I think it's just like a lot of things in college. So it all started there.
Okay. And so from studies in college, you were kind of like, yes, this is a combination of a couple of things that I love and that I enjoy doing, and then I'm going to make a career out of it. So you get the degree, and then what happens next? Is there like a certification that you got? Was there further education that you had to get? Was there a first step where you had to choose between hospital, school, or daycare? Like I have no idea where psychologists are. So yeah.
So I think one of the wonderful things about social work, honestly, is you can work in all of those fields and not need to specifically get any specific certification. Like you do have to get licensed as a social worker, get your master's. Once you get your master's, depending on the state that you live in, you have to look into the state requirements. In New York specifically, you have to take the test, and then you have to pass the test, and then once you pass the test, you go for the licensing. And then there's 2 levels of licensing in New York, specifically with social work. So right now I have my master's of social work, but as Ayana knows, I've been working on getting my clinical license in social work, which is the next level where I can do supervision, and I can, and I no longer need to be supervised. So, I think that's also, and I can also have my own office, and I want to do some of my own sort of office space as well.
Sound like so sweet. Yes.
So all of those things. So it just starts with looking into like what are your state requirements in terms of social work. For the most part, though, you have to take the test. That's a national test that you take, and then you look into what are the application parts. And then you do need to do continuing education, so you need to continue to take courses. You can specialize and take a lot of different certifications once you graduate, but that's up to you, up to your personal preference, or you can work in daycares, you can work in hospitals. I work in a school, so I do have my school social worker certification, but you don't have to if you don't want to necessarily work in a school. So I think that's one of the things I like about social work. I've worked in so many different settings, primarily schools, but so many different settings, and I think you're able to like explore that.
What kept you going then, and what continues to keep you now?
Yeah, so that's such a great question, because honestly, social work, especially when I first started, I was starting to feel burnt out. It's a lot of work in nonprofit, and living in a city like New York, sometimes it could be hard in terms of like financially, like working on that, like doing nonprofit and wanting to do it because you're passionate for it, but then financially there's not always like that compensation for all of the work you have to do. So when I first started, there were times where I was like, do I really want to do social work? Like going from house to house, doing the family therapy at home. Sometimes it's a little draining, honestly, and the traveling and then having to go home and figuring out, you know, like having to cook dinner like late at night because I'm traveling back and forth. But I think what keeps me going, honestly, is that I'm just so passionate about working with children, working with families, and you get like little rewards through your work with them. And I think just seeing their growth, seeing family dynamics change, and being a part of their journey. And I think that to me is so gratifying, to be able to help families and empower them to feel like they can continue like without me, in terms of like continuing their family growth and the individual, you know, child's growth, or the individual's growth themselves. So I think it's honestly just being a part of like this journey. Sometimes it kind of gives you you take a step back from like that burnout portion, and just being like, wow, like humans are amazing. So to me, it's just like so beautiful to see that. And I think having a great support at work, I think the work environment plays a part in nonprofit and any really work situation, but I think in nonprofit, especially when you have a lot of work and you work with people, and people like you carry other people's problems and trying to work through it with them, can be a burnout. So I'm grateful. I have a great supervisor, and I think that's what's helped me. I've had great supervisors. I've had some that weren't so great, and I think that's something that you learn through your work. So I've been able to like have great supervisors that support me, and I think that's helped me, and just also just my passion for working with children.
The humanistic aspect of your work has such impact, and I feel like there's going to be an effect on you and them no matter what, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, but it's definitely, it sounds very rewarding. So what should ladies and girls that are watching, what should they essentially understand or acquire in order to attain the level of which you've attained?
Yeah.
Like, what are those intangible skill sets? What are the tangible and more tactical skills that these ladies and girls should start to consider obtaining in order to succeed in a career path?
Yeah, well, and it is that sort of humanistic part of your job, essentially, as a social worker, depending on what setting you work in, but it's still, you tend to work with people. And I think one of the most important things, it starts with self-care, honestly. Like, you have to learn how to take care of yourself, because there is so much burnout that can happen in terms of working with people, carrying people's sort of issues with them, and then having to have your own sort of personal things in your life that you have to work through as well. So I think it starts, one, with knowing how you sort of handle your own self-care and making that a priority. Because when I first started, I think I had a hard time with that, because I would go to sleep sometimes thinking of like, how do I help these families? What do I do? And it's like, I couldn't sleep like thinking about it. And I think I've learned that it is so important to like self-care, create boundaries for yourself with your personal life and your work life in terms of social work. Some of the tangible things, like being a good listener and learning to be non-judgmental, because you're going to come across so many people. And I've worked with so many different families of so many different like races, ethnicities, and I've worked with children that are, have developmental delays with autism. So big part of it is also being open to others and learning about yourself and them in the process. So listening, being non-judgmental, having a lot of empathy is going to be really important in social work and doing therapy in general, because if you're noticing like you're feeling like you can't connect with this person, they're going to feel it too in that therapy session, and there's going to be a huge disconnect, which is something for you to process too. I think that's part of supervision, having a good supervisor where you can talk about these things, like, I'm noticing like I can't connect with this person and I have a lack of empathy for them. So I think, again, like having self-awareness, having self-care, hopefully a good supervisor, and being able to just notice yourself in the session, notice yourself in therapy, and listening. I think listening not just to them, but also listening to yourself. What are you feeling? What are some of the things that you're feeling in the session? And just kind of being aware of like, oh, I'm feeling this and I'm feeling that. Because sometimes you'll be like, I'm feeling a little anxious in here. Why is that? And it could very well be there's something going on in the session. So I think a big part of it is listen to yourself, trust yourself in those moments, and all of those things kind of like come naturally. So I think knowing who you are too, and can I handle like hearing all these stories? Can I handle, some of the trauma that people bring into session? So, I think that's one of the most important things that any ladies and girls and women that are looking to go into social work is what can I handle? Listen to yourself and take care of yourself through it all, because it can be a lot, but it could be so rewarding.
And are there any challenges that you face that you feel would be helpful or necessary to mention?
Is supervision. Sometimes not having the best work environment can be difficult, and again, nonprofit can be very overwhelming sometimes. And if you don't feel like you have a lot of support, I've been in settings where I didn't feel very supported, and I felt so drained, and I felt so tired. I'd get home and like just want to go to sleep all the time, and I realized like, this is not good. Like,
No,
I don't want to
it's not.
just come home every day and just want to go to sleep and not feel like I had a supervisor that I could talk to. Yes, I had great coworkers at times. Sometimes also just finding really great coworkers to talk things through is really helpful. But I've had challenges with, I didn't have a great supervisor, and it's kind of like you have to find your own way. And especially at the beginning when you're still trying to find yourself in the social work field, it could be really, really challenging. So it's a learning process, it's a learning curve, and I think also giving yourself that space to learn and giving yourself that space to know that even though you may not feel like you're going to help everyone that you work with in the way that you hope to, that's also okay, because it could be a challenge. And I think again, work-life balance is important, and that can be a challenge sometimes because it can take a lot of your time kind of doing the therapy session. I have a lot of notes to do, Ayana knows this, a lot of therapy notes I need to write, and just things that I need to continue to update in terms of paperwork. So paperwork can be exhausting, and I think again, work-life balance is important because that could be a really, really big challenge. So that's always, I think, one of the biggest challenges in social work is work-life balance and feeling like you're so drained by your job, and that's not hopefully what social work will be forever, you know, for anybody. I think it could start off that way because it started off that way for me, and I learned throughout the years work-life balance is super important.
And a really good supervisor. So even if your goal, sounds like, even if your goal is to become that supervisor level or that clinical level, you have to really work on developing those leadership skills in an empathetic way. Yeah. So what's next for you?
So as I kind of mentioned, I am working on my clinical license, so that's my next goal. I do want to also work in universities. I want to do a class, which is part of, you know, once I do get my clinical license, I want to teach a social work class, and be able to provide support to students, because again, I've had challenges as a social worker, and I think one of the things I'm passionate about is sort of helping others in the field and like working through those challenges and knowing that it's okay, you're not the only one, and sometimes it makes you feel like you want to give up in social work, and I want to be able to support college students working through that, and so those are my next sort of steps right now, is getting my clinical license. I still have to do the big test for it, so I'm in the process of studying for that. I finally finished all the paperwork. That's also a lot, so if anybody wants to go for their next level, it could be a lot of paperwork that you have to submit through, again, whatever state you're in. You have to look into what are their requirements, what do you need to submit, and then working through that to get there. And then I eventually want to have my own office and, you know, be able to provide therapy from my, you know, like in my own setting and not through a different setting. But and I also want to do consultation in schools.
Love it. All right, so as we come to a close today, just want to let the people connect with you however best they can connect with you. If you all have questions, if you all want to pick her brain, if you're already in the process of going through your psychology classes or your social work, what do you call them, rotations perhaps, how can people connect with you?
So I would say connect with me through LinkedIn. And again, my name is Elsa, last name DeLeon. So E-L-S-A, first name, last name D-E-L-E-O-N. And connect with me through there. You're going to see my picture, and then you're going to see, it's going to say, you know, my most current title, which is a bilingual school-based clinician. So I think that would be, you know, the best.
We're going to have more episodes coming, so stay tuned.
You're right, just breathe. You'll be fine, you'll see.